The soup exploded across the polished marble floor. Silence crashed through the charity hall a heartbeat later. Then came a laughter. I knew he'd ruin it. Who invited him? A homeless volunteer carrying food? What did they expect? The voices struck harder than the security guard's hand gripping my shoulder. I didn't do it on purpose, I said, trying to steady the empty container, still trembling in my fingers. No one listened. The old man lying beside the overturned wheelchair coughed violently. His expensive charcoal coat was soaked with vegetable broth. Steam curled into the cold evening air pouring through the open entrance. The chairman of the Greystone Foundation, or so everyone believed, a young executive rushed over, pointing directly at me. "Throw him out." Several cameras flashed. Tonight's charity gala had invited dozens of media outlets. Their headlines were already writing themselves. Homeless volunteer attacks elderly donor. I closed my eyes for a second. So this was how it ended. 3 months without stable work. 2 weeks sleeping beneath the Riverside Bridge. 1 bowl of soup left to my name. I had planned to eat it after helping serve dinner. Instead, I had given it away. Now everyone looked at me as though I were filth. I said moo. The guard shoved me hard. My back struck a stone pillar. Pain shot through my ribs. I didn't fight back. Fighting had never changed anything. It only gave people another excuse to look away. Then an unexpected voice cut through the noise. Enough. It wasn't loud. Yet every conversation stopped. The old man slowly pushed himself upright without accepting anyone's hand. He stared directly at me. Not at the spilled soup. Not at his stained clothes. At me. "What happened?" he asked calmly. The executive answered before I could speak. "He deliberately bumped into you, Chairman." "I see." The old man continued watching me. "You." His finger pointed toward me. "Tell me." The entire hall turned. For the first time that night, someone wanted to hear my side. I swallowed. The floor was wet. The executive scoffed. "Ridiculous." I ignored him. "I saw your wheelchair slipping. I reached to stop it. My foot slid. I dropped the soup. I failed." The chairman remained silent. His sharp eyes drifted toward the marble. Several melted ice cubes glittered beneath the buffet table. Someone had spilled a drink earlier. No one had cleaned it. His gaze returned to the executive. "You inspected this venue yourself?" The man's confident smile disappeared. "Yes. And you missed that. You nearly caused an accident." The executive paled. Around us, whispers changed direction. The chairman slowly bent down. Everyone gasped. He picked up my cracked food container with his own hands. What was inside? Vegetable soup. "For yourself?" I hesitated. "Yes. You gave it to me instead." I thought. I stopped. Why explain? No one cared. But he waited. "I thought you looked hungrier than I did." The laughter vanished. Even the cameras stopped clicking. The chairman looked at the empty container for several long seconds. Then he smiled. A tired smile. One that didn't belong to someone attending glamorous charity events. "It seems," he murmured, "only one person here understands why we built this foundation." The executive's face turned white. "You are dismissed." "What?" "Effective immediately." "Chairman, you heard me." Security changed direction. Instead of dragging me away, they escorted the executive toward the exit. The room remained frozen. The chairman turned back to me. "What is your name?" "Ethan." "Ethan." He repeated it quietly, as though trying to remember something long forgotten. "Walk with me." Gasps followed every step we took together. No one understood why. Neither did I. Outside, rain had begun to fall. The city lights blurred into silver rivers. The chairman stood beneath the awning, breathing deeply. "You've had difficult days." It wasn't a question. I laughed softly. "You can tell. A man who saves his last meal for someone else carries a particular expression." I looked away. "I've lost everything." "Family?" I nodded. "Work?" "Yes." "Friends?" I smiled without humor. "They disappeared first." The chairman remained quiet. He didn't offer empty sympathy. He simply listened, something no one had done in years. Finally he spoke. "Come see me tomorrow." He handed me a simple business card. There was no grand title, only a name. Nathan Hale. An address. And a phone number. I don't belong in places like that. You'll decide after you've seen it. A black sedan pulled up. Before entering, he looked back once. You changed more than my evening today." Then he left. I stood alone beneath the rain. The card grew damp in my hand. Behind me, people leaving the gala stared as if I had stepped into another world. I almost threw the card away. Almost. Instead, I slipped it carefully into my worn jacket. I had no idea that accepting one bowl of hunger had just changed the direction of my life. The shelter closed before midnight. Again, we're full. The volunteer didn't even recognize me anymore. I nodded. No problem. There was no anger left, only exhaustion. I returned beneath the bridge, overlooking the river. Rain drummed against the concrete above. The business card remained dry inside my pocket. Nathan Hale. Who was he, really? Why had he looked at me as though we had known each other? Questions followed me into another sleepless night. Morning arrived colder than usual. My stomach cramped with hunger. I stared at the address for nearly 20 minutes before forcing myself to stand. If they're mocking me, I whispered, I'll walk away. No expectations. No hope. Hope had become expensive. I couldn't afford it anymore. The address led me to the tallest building in the financial district. Glass reflected the morning sun like polished ice. Employees in tailored suits hurried through revolving doors without noticing the man in worn shoes standing outside. I checked the card 3 times. Same address. Wrong world. A security guard approached. Can I help you? I'm here to see Nathan Hale. His eyebrows lifted. Appointment. He invited me. The guard looked at my clothes, then at my face, then at the card. His expression changed instantly. One moment, he spoke quietly into an earpiece. Less than 30 seconds later, another man in an immaculate navy suit hurried toward me. Mr. Ethan? I blinked. Yes, I'm Daniel Brooks. He extended both hands respectfully. Mr. Hale has been expecting you. The lobby fell silent. Receptionists exchanged stunned glances. Employees slowed their pace. No one understood why someone like me was being welcomed instead of removed. Daniel led me to a private elevator requiring a security card. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Unshaven, tired, shoes splitting at the seams. I looked like a mistake inside a building that worshiped perfection. You seem nervous, Daniel said. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. He smiled. No, the chairman rarely repeats himself. Chairman. The words settled uneasily in my chest. The elevator opened onto the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Books lined dark wooden shelves. No unnecessary luxury, only quiet confidence. Nathan Hale stood beside a kettle, pouring tea. Gone was the wheelchair. Gone was the heavy overcoat. He stood straight, though a slight limp remained. He looked less like an elderly charity organizer, and more like a man who had built empires. You came. I almost didn't. I know. He handed me a warm cup. I hoped curiosity would win. It barely did. He laughed. A genuine laugh this time. Sit. I obeyed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence felt strangely comfortable. Finally, he opened a folder. Inside were photographs. Of me. Years old. Working construction. Helping flood victims. Delivering food during the pandemic. Repairing playground equipment. I stared in disbelief. Ow! I've watched you for a long time. Every instinct told me to leave. Why? Because your father once saved my life. The room became perfectly still. My father died 8 years ago. I attended his funeral. I looked up sharply. I never saw you. You weren't looking at anyone. He wasn't wrong. That day I had buried my father. 2 months later, my mother followed him. Everything after that had become survival. Nathan folded his hands. Your father refused a reward. He said something I'll never forget. Nathan's voice softened. If kindness expects payment, it becomes a transaction. My throat tightened. That sounded exactly like my father. I searched for you afterward. I wanted to help. You disappeared. I didn't need charity. No, you needed opportunity. He slid another folder across the table. An employment contract. Community Development Division. Training included. Housing provided. Salary generous enough to rebuild an entire life. I didn't touch it. Why me? Because yesterday confirmed what I suspected. He leaned forward. When you believed I was simply an old stranger, you still chose to give away your only meal. His eyes held no pity, only certainty. Skills can be taught. Character cannot. A knock interrupted us. Daniel entered, visibly uneasy. Chairman, what is it? The board has arrived. Nathan sighed. They're early. Daniel glanced toward me. They're asking about our guest. Nathan smiled faintly. Good. Bring them in. Within moments, 6 executives entered. Every one of them stopped after seeing me. One woman frowned openly. Chairman, who is this? Nathan answered without hesitation. The man I intend to mentor. Another executive laughed. A homeless drifter? The room chilled. Nathan's expression didn't change. I suggest choosing your next sentence carefully. The executive shrugged. Our shareholders won't accept this. Nathan slowly closed the employment folder. Interesting. He looked around the table. Which of you believes kindness damages business? No one answered, but several avoided his eyes. Nathan nodded once. As I feared, he turned toward me. Ethan, yes. I invited you here because I thought this company had forgotten why it existed. He faced the board again. It appears. I was right. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. For reasons I couldn't yet understand. My arrival had exposed cracks far deeper than spilled soup. And every person in that room knew something irreversible had just begun. She smiled warmly. I'm Grace. Before I could answer, she handed me a notebook. Welcome. No suspicion. No judgment. Just welcome. It felt unfamiliar. Grace noticed my hesitation. You look surprised. I am. We're too busy helping people to worry about appearances. For the first time in months, I laughed. A genuine one. Later that afternoon, Grace reviewed several community outreach projects with me. You've worked construction before? Yes. Volunteer kitchens? A little. Emergency shelters? I lived in one. She stopped writing. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I know. She nodded. Good. The conversation moved naturally after that. No pity, only practical questions. I found myself suggesting improvements for a damaged apartment complex one of their team supported. Grace blinked. That's actually, she grabbed a map, a better solution than ours. I only noticed because I used to repair buildings like that. Within minutes, she had invited 3 project managers into the discussion. Instead of dismissing my opinion, they listened. By evening, my sketch had replaced weeks of expensive planning. Grace smiled. You've saved us almost $80,000. I stared at the drawing. I only moved the loading entrance. Exactly. Meanwhile, several floors above us. The board meeting resumed without Nathan. Mr. Carter slammed a folder shut. This has gone too far. Another executive frowned. The chairman trusts that man. That's the problem. What if he influences him? We've spent years restructuring this company, and now some homeless volunteer suddenly becomes his favorite. A younger director remained quiet. Finally, he spoke. Maybe we're worried for the wrong reason. Carter looked sharply at him. What does that mean? It means... The younger man hesitated. If the chairman starts looking closely at people instead of reports. He left the sentence unfinished. No one argued, because everyone understood. Too many decisions over the last 3 years had looked impressive on paper, while quietly destroying the communities the company claimed to support. Nathan had trusted numbers. Now, he had begun trusting people again, and that terrified them. That evening, Daniel found me preparing to leave. You forgot something. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a key card, another key, and an address. What is this? Company housing. I can't accept. You already have. I didn't sign anything. Daniel smiled. The chairman signed first. I stared at him. What? He said sleeping under a bridge makes it difficult to change the world. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Not because of gratitude, because someone had quietly solved a problem without making me feel small. There was dignity in that. Nathan understood the difference. The apartment overlooked a small public park. Nothing extravagant. Clean walls. Simple furniture. A bookshelf. A kitchen. Fresh towels folded neatly beside the bed. It wasn't luxury. It was stability. I stood in the doorway for nearly 10 minutes before stepping inside. The silence felt strange. No traffic roaring above concrete. No fear someone would steal my backpack while I slept. No rain dripping through broken beams. Just peace. I placed my old backpack beside the couch. Everything I owned fit inside it. 2 shirts, a photograph of my parents, a worn notebook, and the cracked food container from the charity gala. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. A single meal had somehow become the dividing line between my old life and whatever came next. The next morning began before sunrise. I reached the office early. Grace was already there. I had a feeling you would. She tossed me a coffee. We've got trouble. She spread photographs across the table. A neighborhood renovation funded by Hale Industries had stalled. According to official reports, construction was 90% complete. The photographs showed something entirely different. Broken roofs, unsafe wiring, families still living in mold-filled apartments. I frowned. These reports don't match. They don't. Then why approve them? Grace sighed. Because approvals happen upstairs. She didn't need to explain further. Someone was lying. The question wasn't who. It was how many. Nathan joined us an hour later. He studied the photographs quietly, then looked at me. What do you see? I answered honestly. Someone signed papers without visiting the site. Grace exchanged a glance with Nathan. He nodded. Would you like to verify it yourself? You trust me with that. I trust your eyes. By noon, we stood inside the apartment complex. Children played beside exposed electrical cables. An elderly woman welcomed us inside. The company said repairs were finished. She laughed bitterly. They never came back. I inspected the walls. Fresh paint covered deep cracks. Cheap cosmetic work. Nothing structural. Someone had hidden dangerous damage instead of fixing it. Grace whispered, "This could collapse." My stomach tightened. People have been living here. Families. Because someone wanted quarterly profits to look better. A little boy tugged my sleeve. "Mister," I knelt. "Yes." "Can you fix our ceiling?" I looked upward. Rain stains spread across loose concrete. "I'll try." His smile carried more trust than I deserved. Behind me, Nathan watched silently. On the drive back, no one spoke. Nathan finally broke the silence. "Do you understand now why I wanted you here?" I nodded slowly. "This isn't about charity. No, it's about responsibility." He looked out the window. "I built this company believing success meant improving lives." His voice became quieter. Somewhere along the way, people learned how to impress me without telling me the truth. That evening, Carter entered Nathan's office without knocking. "You've been inspecting projects personally." "Yes." "You never used to." Nathan continued reading. "I do now." Carter forced a smile. Surely one unfinished property isn't enough to question years of leadership. Nathan finally looked up. "You're right." Carter relaxed. Nathan closed the file. "It isn't one property. It is 37. The color drained from Carter's face. Nathan slid a stack of inspection reports across the desk. "I've been reviewing them for weeks." Weeks. Long before the charity gala. Long before meeting me. The investigation had already begun. I hadn't changed Nathan's direction. I had simply confirmed his decision. Carter swallowed hard. "You think I'm responsible?" Nathan answered quietly. "I think you're afraid." The room fell silent. Because fear often appeared before guilt admitted its name. Outside the office door, Daniel stood unnoticed. He had heard everything, and in his hand rested another sealed envelope. Inside it was evidence that could bring down far more than one executive. Daniel waited until Carter's footsteps faded down the hallway before knocking softly on Nathan's office door. "Come in." Nathan looked up from the inspection reports. "You heard enough?" Daniel nodded once. "I heard what mattered." He placed the sealed envelope on the desk. "I've been verifying these for 3 months." Nathan opened it slowly. Inside were copies of internal emails, payment authorizations, contractor invoices, and anonymous complaints that had never reached his office. He read the first page without expression, then the second. By the 5th, his fingers tightened around the papers. So it wasn't isolated. "No." "How many?" Daniel took a slow breath. "At least 12 major projects." Nathan closed the file. "And the money?" "Diverted through shell contractors." Nathan looked out the window toward the city. So they weren't simply neglecting people. They were profiting from them. Silence settled between the two men. Not the silence of surprise. The silence of confirmation. I spent the next week traveling with Grace to neighborhoods Hale Industries proudly displayed in annual reports. Every brochure showed smiling families. Every ribbon-cutting ceremony looked perfect. Reality smelled different. Damp walls, broken elevators, children carrying water upstairs because pumps had never worked. A disabled veteran struggled to climb 4 flights of stairs. The company promised an accessible lift, he said. They installed one. He pointed toward the entrance. It broke after 3 weeks. Did they repair it? He laughed without humor. They photographed it. Then they left. Grace quietly wrote notes. I didn't. I couldn't. The notebook remained closed in my hands because every page would have looked the same. Promises. Photographs. Abandonment. On Friday afternoon, Nathan asked me to join him for lunch. Not in an expensive restaurant. At the same community kitchen where we'd first met. The volunteers greeted him warmly. No cameras. No speeches. He carried trays like everyone else. You come here often? I asked. Every month. I've never seen you. I usually arrive after closing. We sat near the back. The soup tasted almost identical to the one I'd spilled. Nathan smiled faintly after noticing my expression. Remembering, yes, I've wondered something. What? If I hadn't dropped that bowl? He interrupted gently. You still would have given it away. I think so. That's what mattered. He stirred his soup slowly. Ethan, I've spent decades rewarding talent. His eyes drifted toward the volunteers. I should have rewarded character sooner. Across town, Carter wasn't eating. He was drinking. His expensive office overlooked the same skyline Nathan admired. But today, every building looked like a witness. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, what? The auditors requested original contractor files. He froze. Who authorized that? The chairman. His glass stopped halfway to his lips. When? This morning. His heartbeat quickened. Delay them. We've already tried. They insisted. He slammed the glass onto the desk. Then make the files disappear. The assistant didn't move. Sir, there are digital backups. Carter closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he realized money couldn't erase everything. Grace found me late that evening reviewing construction photographs. You're still here. I keep thinking. About what? If this company hadn't ignored these neighborhoods. I looked at a cracked playground. That little boy would already have a safe ceiling. Grace sat beside me. You blame yourself too easily. I wasn't here. You couldn't have been. I know, but I still wonder. She smiled sadly. That's why Nathan chose you. What do you mean? Most people ask who's responsible. She tapped the photograph. You ask who needed help. Monday morning brought unexpected visitors. 3 department managers requested private meetings with Nathan. One after another. By lunchtime, 7 more had joined them. Daniel informed me quietly. They're volunteering information. Why now? Because someone finally started listening. Fear had changed sides. People who had stayed silent for years suddenly believed the truth might matter. The walls protecting the executives were beginning to crack, and no one wanted to be buried beneath them. The first whistleblower arrived carrying a cardboard box. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her hand shook as she placed it on Nathan's desk. My name is Olivia. Nathan stood. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. She looked toward the closed door. They'll destroy my career. Nathan answered calmly. They've already tried. Olivia swallowed. I processed contractor payments. She opened the box. Every fake invoice. Every altered signature. Every emergency repair that had existed only on paper. The evidence filled the desk. Nathan never interrupted. When she finished, she whispered. I kept copies because... Her voice broke. I knew one day someone would ask. Nathan simply said, You did the right thing. She began crying. Not because of guilt. Because those were the first words anyone had spoken without accusing her. By the end of the week, more employees came forward. Then 9. Then 14. Each story matched the last. Budgets approved. Repairs reduced. Money redirected. Communities forgotten. No one person had created the corruption, but everyone had learned to survive beside it. Some through greed, others through fear. Nathan gathered the senior leadership team. This time, I remained outside the conference room with Daniel. The glass walls blurred voices into muffled echoes. Occasionally, someone raised their voice. Then silence returned. Daniel folded his arms. Nervous? I'm not supposed to be part of this. You already are. I've done nothing. He smiled slightly. Exactly. I frowned. I don't understand. The chairman once told me something. What? Integrity doesn't shout. He looked toward the conference room. It changes the room simply by entering it. Inside, Nathan laid every document across the table. No dramatic speech. No accusations. Only facts. Explain. That single word traveled around the room. One executive blamed contractors. Another blamed regional managers. Someone blamed outdated systems. Someone else blamed budget cuts. Each explanation collapsed beneath another document. Another email. Another signature. Another transfer. Finally, Nathan looked at Carter. You've been unusually quiet. Carter straightened his tie. I've served this company for 18 years. I know. I increased profits. You did. I protected shareholders. Nathan nodded. At the expense of whom? Carter remained silent. Nathan slid forward a photograph. The little boy who had asked me to fix his ceiling smiled at the camera. Above him, concrete hung loose. Tell him about shareholder value. No one spoke. Not even Carter. That evening, I returned to the apartment later than usual. Someone sat on the bench outside. An elderly woman. She stood as I approached. You don't know me. I shook my head. No. My husband worked for Hale Industries. She held out a small envelope. He died before the company finished repairing our building. My chest tightened. I don't want compensation. She smiled gently. I came to thank you. For what? You listened. She placed the envelope in my hands. Inside was an old photograph. Her husband stood beside a newly planted tree decades earlier. Nathan stood beside him, both smiling. On the back, someone had written, "A company should leave people with stronger roots than it found them." I stared at the faded handwriting. The company had once believed those words. Somewhere, it had forgotten. As I looked up to thank her, she had already begun walking away. The photograph remained in my hands. A quiet reminder that truth wasn't only exposing corruption. It was remembering why something had existed before greed changed its purpose. And upstairs, in Nathan's office, the final pieces of evidence were arriving. Documents that would make it impossible for anyone to deny what had happened. Rain hammered against the windows of Hale Industries headquarters. By 8 o'clock that morning, every member of the board had received the same message. Mandatory extraordinary board meeting. Attendance required. No explanation. No agenda. Only Nathan's signature. The atmosphere inside the executive floor felt different from the previous weeks. Nobody lingered near the coffee machines. Nobody joked in the hallways. Eyes met only briefly before looking away. Fear had become impossible to hide. Daniel met me outside the conference room. You don't have to go in. I know, but Nathan asked me to. Daniel nodded, then stand beside him. For support? No. He gave a faint smile. For perspective? I frowned. I still don't understand why he wants me there. You will. The conference room doors closed with a heavy click. 12 directors. 7 senior executives. Outside legal counsel. Independent auditors. Nathan sat at the head of the table. I remained near the wall. Invisible. Exactly where I prefer to be. Nathan waited until everyone settled. Then he quietly switched on the large screen behind him. A timeline appeared. 3 years. 37 projects. Hundreds of pages. Millions of dollars. No dramatic music. No accusations. Only dates. Contracts. Photographs. Inspection reports. Every missing brick. Every forged signature. Every abandoned family. The silence became suffocating. Nathan spoke calmly. For months, I believed these failures resulted from incompetence. He paused. I was wrong. He changed the slide. A network diagram filled the screen. Shell companies. Fake contractors. Hidden ownership. Money flowing in circles. Eventually, every line reached the same destination. Carter Holdings. Carter's face lost all color. One director whispered, "Impossible." The lead auditor answered before Nathan could. We independently verified every transaction. Another slide appeared. Bank transfers. Property purchases. luxury vacations, private accounts. The room seemed to shrink. Carter finally stood. This proves nothing. Nathan looked at him steadily. Sit down. I refuse. Nathan didn't raise his voice. You've mistaken this meeting for a negotiation. Security quietly entered through a side door. No one had noticed them arrive. Carter looked around desperately. None of you actually believe this. Several directors lowered their eyes. One by one, not in agreement. In shame, Nathan turned toward another executive. Mrs. Lang. She flinched. You approved emergency repairs at East Harbor Apartments. Yes. Were they completed? She hesitated. No. Why did you sign? Tears gathered in her eyes. I was told. By whom? She looked toward Carter. He stared back silently. The answer was enough. Nathan nodded. Thank you. She broke down completely. I should have refused. Yes. I knew people were still living there. Yes. I was afraid. Nathan's expression softened. I know. He didn't excuse her actions, but he recognized the fear behind them. That difference mattered. The auditors distributed printed reports. Nobody spoke. Paper turning became the only sound in the room. Then Nathan reached beneath the table. He lifted something wrapped in plain cloth. Slowly, he unwrapped it. A cracked plastic food container. Mine. Every eye turned toward it. Confusion spread across the room. Nathan placed it gently in the center of the table. Does anyone know what this is? No answer. It held one bowl of vegetable soup. Still silence. A homeless man gave away his final meal because he believed an old stranger needed it more. His voice remained steady. No cameras. No reward. No expectation. He looked around the room. Tell me, when did this company stop deserving people like him? Nobody answered. Because nobody could. The container remained on the table, more powerful than every financial report beside it. Nathan stood. His limp was barely noticeable now. Age had slowed his body, not his conviction. When I founded Hale Industries, he rested one hand on the chair. Our first office had one leaking roof. We couldn't afford proper furniture. We certainly couldn't afford public relations. A faint smile crossed his face. But every building we repaired, we inspected ourselves. He looked toward the directors. We celebrated because families slept safely, not because quarterly reports looked impressive. Silence. You measured success in percentages. I measured it in lives. Carter suddenly laughed. It sounded hollow. So that's it. He spread his hands dramatically. You're replacing decades of business experience with emotions? Nathan answered immediately. No, I'm replacing dishonesty with accountability. Carter turned toward the board. If you remove me, share prices will collapse. Investors will panic. Thousands of jobs. One director interrupted him. No. Everyone looked toward the speaker. It was Mr. Emerson, the oldest board member. For years, he had rarely spoken. Today, his voice carried surprising strength. We're panicking because of what you did, not because of Nathan. Another director nodded. Then another. One after another. The room changed, not through shouting, through quiet decisions. Carter watched allies disappear without a single dramatic confrontation. The lead auditor stood. We recommend immediate termination, referral for criminal investigation, full financial recovery proceedings. Nathan signed a recommendation. One signature. Years of deception ended. Security stepped forward. Carter didn't resist this time. He simply stared at Nathan. You think you've won? Nathan shook his head. This was never about winning. It's about making sure that little boy gets the ceiling he was promised. Carter laughed bitterly. You'll never fix everything. No, Nathan agreed. But today, we stop pretending it's already fixed. Security escorted Carter toward the door. He paused beside me. So, he sneered. The homeless hero. I met his eyes calmly. I never came here to defeat you. I know. His smile faded. That's what makes this unbearable. He walked away without another word. The door closed behind him. His downfall had begun long before this meeting. He simply hadn't noticed. News spread quickly. By afternoon, television crews gathered outside headquarters. Employees stood in clusters, whispering. Some feared the future. Others looked relieved. Grace found me in the lobby. You should see this. She handed me her phone. Community residents had already begun posting messages online, not celebrating arrests, celebrating inspections. Repairs had resumed. Construction crews had returned. Electricians, engineers, roofing teams. Promises were finally becoming work. I smiled quietly. That's faster than I expected. Grace looked toward the window. Nathan prepared for this. He already had replacement contractors waiting. He wasn't planning revenge. He was planning recovery. Late that evening, the building had almost emptied. Nathan stood alone in the community development office, looking at the large city map covering the wall. Colored pins marked every unfinished project. I walked in carrying 2 cups of tea. He accepted one with a grateful nod. You've been standing here a long time. I'm counting. What? The people we disappointed. I looked at the map. There are too many. There always were. After a long silence, he smiled. But today, he gently removed the first red pin, then replaced it with a green one. One less. I watched him continue, not celebrating victory, beginning responsibility. Outside, construction trucks rolled into neighborhoods that had waited years for help. Inside, Hale Industries began rebuilding something even harder to repair than damaged buildings. Its conscience. Winter arrived quietly. Unlike the storm that had swept through Hale Industries months earlier, this season brought no dramatic headlines. The news vans had disappeared. The reporters had moved on. Real work, I learned, rarely attracted cameras. It happened before sunrise, in muddy boots and worn gloves. It happened in neighborhoods where promises had grown old. I stood outside East Harbor Apartments as workers installed the final steel support beneath the building's cracked foundation. The little boy who had once tugged at my sleeve ran across the courtyard, waving excitedly. Mr. Ethan. I smiled. You remember me. You said you'd try. He pointed proudly toward his building. You fixed it. I looked at the construction crew. They fixed it. He shook his head. They only came after you visited. Children often reduced complicated truths into simple ones. I couldn't argue with him. His mother approached, carrying 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. You've been here every week. She handed me one. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She looked toward the repair balconies. I stopped believing anyone from a company would ever come back. I'm sorry. She gave a gentle smile. You don't have to apologize for what you didn't do. Her words lingered with me long after she returned inside. For months, I had carried guilt that had never truly belonged to me. Maybe healing also meant learning which burdens to set down. Back at headquarters, Grace gathered our team around a whiteboard covered with new proposals. We've received funding approval. Cheers filled the room. She laughed. Don't celebrate yet. There are 12 more communities asking for help. Someone groaned dramatically. Another volunteer raised both hands. I'll take 2. The room erupted with laughter. I watched quietly. Months ago, I had eaten alone beneath a bridge. Now, people argued over who could help more families. The difference felt almost unreal. Nathan entered carrying a worn leather notebook. Conversation stopped. He placed it on the table. I found this while cleaning my office. Grace recognized it immediately. The original development journal? Nathan nodded. My first project notes. He opened the fragile pages carefully. Each entry contained names instead of numbers. Families, teachers, small business owners. Beside every name, a handwritten update. Roof repaired. Children returned to school. Mrs. Chen's bakery reopened. I turned another page. There wasn't a single financial chart. Nathan smiled. We became successful because we solved human problems. He looked around the room. Never reverse that equation. After the meeting, I remained behind. Nathan closed the notebook gently. You've changed. I hope so. No. He smiled. You stand differently. I looked down confused. I do. When we first met. He paused. You apologized before speaking. I remembered. Every sentence had begun with uncertainty. Now, I simply answer questions. I hadn't noticed the change. Nathan had. I think. I searched for the right words. People stopped treating me like I was invisible. He shook his head. No, you stopped believing you were. His words settled somewhere deep inside me. Confidence hadn't arrived all at once. It had been built quietly, one honest conversation at a time. Several weeks later, Hale Industries held its annual employee gathering. In previous years, Grace told me, the event had focused on profits, expansion, and awards. This year looked different. Photographs lined the entrance, not of executives, of completed neighborhoods, children planting trees, families unlocking repaired homes, workers standing proudly beside finished buildings. Every image reminded us why we existed. Nathan walked onto the stage without prepared remarks. He looked older than when I'd first met him. The months had demanded much from him, but his eyes seemed lighter. He adjusted the microphone. I've spent most of my career believing leadership meant having answers. A quiet smile crossed his face. I was wrong. The audience remained completely silent. Leadership begins with listening. He glanced toward me. Several months ago, a stranger offered me his last meal. Many employees already knew the story. Some had heard it dozens of times, yet nobody seemed tired of it. That meal reminded me that generosity survives even when comfort disappears. He looked across the crowd. If one hungry man could choose compassion, then a successful company has no excuse for choosing indifference. Applause rose slowly. Not loud, not forced. Steady, sincere. After the event, I slipped outside onto the terrace. The city lights stretched across the river like scattered stars. Daniel joined me, carrying 2 cups of tea. You always find the quiet places. I guess I got used to being alone. He handed me a cup. You aren't anymore. We stood without speaking for a while. Finally, I asked, why did you stay with Nathan all these years? He smiled. Because he never asked me to protect his reputation. What did he ask? The truth. Daniel looked toward the skyline. Even when it hurt. A soft knock interrupted us. Grace stepped onto the terrace. We've got news. She handed me a folder. Inside was a proposal approved unanimously by the board. The Hale Community Fellowship, a new training program. It would hire people rebuilding their lives after homelessness, unemployment, or hardship. Paid training, housing assistance, career development. No charity. Opportunity. I looked up slowly. This was your idea? Grace laughed. It was yours. I never suggested this. You didn't have to. She pointed toward the first page. At the bottom, Nathan had written one sentence in blue ink. People don't need rescuing nearly as often as they need someone willing to believe in them. I closed the folder carefully. Months ago, I had arrived carrying nothing but a cracked food container. Now, hundreds of strangers would receive the chance I had almost walked away from. The future no longer belonged only to me. It belonged to everyone who had been waiting for a door to open. Spring arrived with the scent of fresh paint and blooming trees. The city looked the same from a distance. Up close, it had changed. Scaffolding had disappeared from East Harbor apartments. Broken playgrounds echoed with laughter instead of construction noise. Community gardens had replaced abandoned lots. The work wasn't finished. Perhaps it never would be. But for the first time in years, progress was visible. I stood beside the newly planted oak tree in the courtyard of East Harbor. A small bronze plaque rested at its base. Stronger roots than we found. The phrase from the old photograph. Nathan had insisted it belong here. Children circled the tree with bright ribbons, laughing as volunteers handed out small gardening tools. The little boy who had once asked me to fix his ceiling walked over carrying a watering can almost as big as he was. Mr. Ethan. Yes. My mom says trees grow slowly. They do. He poured water around the roots. Then we should start early. I smiled. You're right. He looked up. Will you come back when it's bigger? I will. You promise? I promise. This time I knew I could keep it. Back at headquarters, another chapter was quietly closing. The criminal investigation into Carter and several former executives had reached its conclusion. Daniel entered Nathan's office, carrying a thin folder. It's over. Nathan looked up. The court. Daniel nodded. Convictions. Asset recovery approved. Funds will be redirected to unfinished community projects. Nathan accepted the folder, but didn't open it. I frowned. You aren't going to read it? Nathan looked out the window. I already know enough. No satisfaction. He smiled gently. I never want a punishment. What I wanted. He gestured toward the city. is happening outside. Workers, families, schools, repairs. Consequences had done what revenge never could. They had restored what greed had stolen. Later that afternoon, I found myself standing outside the old bridge where I had once slept. The river flowed exactly as it had months earlier. Cars rushed overhead. People hurried past without noticing. Nothing had changed, except me. I walked beneath the concrete overpass. The corner where I had spread my worn blanket remained empty. I crouched down, touching the cold ground. Memories returned in fragments. The freezing nights, the hunger, the hopelessness, the business card tucked inside my jacket, the decision not to throw it away. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. An older man stood there holding a torn backpack. His beard was gray, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "You know a place that serves dinner?" I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "I do." He hesitated. "I don't have any money." "You don't need any." He studied me cautiously. "Why would you help?" I remembered another question. Another rainy evening. Another stranger. Because someone had once looked at me and chosen to listen instead of judge. I answered simply, because someone did the same for me. He nodded slowly. Together, we walked away from the bridge. Not because it erased hardship, but because no one should have to leave it alone. 1 year later, the Hale Community Fellowship welcomed its first graduating class. 38 people stood proudly in simple blue jackets embroidered with the company's emblem. Former construction workers, single parents, veterans, people recovering from homelessness, people rebuilding after loss. Each carried a certificate. More importantly, each carried a future. Grace adjusted the microphone. "We've invited someone to say a few words." I looked around. Surely she meant Nathan. Instead, she smiled directly at me. My heart skipped. She whispered, "Just tell the truth." I stepped onto the stage. The room fell quiet. Rows of graduates watched with nervous smiles. Nathan sat in the front row beside Daniel, his hands folded comfortably in his lap. I took a slow breath. I used to think people changed because their luck changed. A few heads nodded. I was wrong. I looked across the audience. People begin changing the moment someone believes they're still worth listening to. Silence. The good kind. The kind that invited honesty. I stood outside this company's doors wearing clothes most people avoided looking at. I expected to be turned away. Instead, I was asked one question. I smiled toward Nathan. "Tell me what happened." My voice grew quieter. Sometimes, a person's entire future depends on someone asking that question before making a judgment. No applause interrupted. No one wanted to break the moment. So if you leave here remembering only one thing. I looked at the graduates. Remember this. Never measure someone's value by the worst day of their life. When I stepped away from the microphone, the applause rose naturally. Not for me. For every person who had survived long enough to stand in that room. As the ceremony ended, Nathan and I wandered into the courtyard. The oak tree planted months earlier had already grown taller. Its young branches swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Nathan rested one hand on the wooden support beside it. "You know," he smiled. "I almost skipped that charity dinner." I laughed softly, "And I almost threw away your business card." He looked at me. Strange how life works. It isn't always the big decisions. "No." I glanced toward the graduates, talking happily with their families. "Sometimes it's one meal." Nathan chuckled. "Sometimes." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the cracked plastic food container. He had repaired it carefully with clear resin, preserving every fracture instead of hiding it. "I thought this belonged with you." I accepted it gently. The cracks remained visible, strong enough to hold together, too honest to pretend they had never existed. Much like people, we stood beneath the growing oak tree in comfortable silence. Children laughed nearby. Construction trucks rolled through neighborhoods no longer forgotten. The city continued moving forward. So did we. Not because one meal had magically solved every problem, but because one act of kindness had reminded a weary man of who he wanted to become, and had given another man the courage not to walk away.